this is a DrumWise Meets, and today I'm here with a drummer who's worked with the likes of Tom Jones, Mike and the Mechanics, Leona Lewis and Bonnie Tyler. This is DrumWise Meets Ben Stone. Hi Ben.
Hi, how you doing, man?
What age did you get into drums? And when you first started playing, what bands or artists inspired you?
I first started playing, I think, when I was 9 years old. That's when I first really picked up the drumsticks and everything. I'd seen my dad play before that, you know, and he used to take me to rehearsals and things. So, yeah, I was sort of around it and sort of dabbling with it. But yeah, nine years old is when I actually learned to play and started really practicing every day and that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, early influences, I think, were the stuff my dad used to make me listen to, which I didn't like at the time, which was like Steely Dan, a lot of prog rock, a lot of vocal rock, you know, the Eagles, a lot of Beatles, you know. And the ones I gravitated more towards, I mean, he tried even getting me to listen to Pink Floyd, but at the time I didn't want to know, you know, and they turned out to be one of my favorite bands, you know, a few years later. So, but yeah, the things I really liked were the Beatles. I used to play along, you know, on headphones with a little CD player, and, you know, cassettes and whatnot. Yeah, Beatles, Led Zeppelin. All the rock stuff and sort of British bands. I didn't really get into the American bands until a little bit later on.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. And when you first started, what was your first drum kit?
Ooh. The first kit that I played on, I've still got. It was my dad's, what would it be now? It's probably about 34, 35 years old or something like that. It is an old Pearl DLX in cherry wood finish. And that was his sort of drum kit at the time. I made him, he wasn't playing anymore, so I made him set it up in the living room. And it didn't move for about 5 years. So, but yeah, that Pearl DLX kit was the first kit that I actually played on properly. That's where I learned to play. And the first kit I ever bought with my own money was a Yamaha Stage Custom. When they first came out, they'd just been released, and I think in Wales anyway, there was maybe one or two in the country, and the local drum store had managed to get one on pre-order before they sort of hit the stores. So I had one of the first ones of those in the country, and that I kept that for a number of years.
Oh, awesome. Oh, good stuff. Yeah. I had not a Stage Custom, a Club Custom, which was one of my first kits. Great, brilliant kits.
Yeah.
And while we're talking about equipment, what's your current setup? Obviously, I see you've got an E-kit set up behind you. So what stuff do you normally use when you're out playing? But yeah, also what have you got there?
Yeah, well, what I've got here is this really cool. I can't move the camera to really show you, but it's a Gava G9. I don't know if you've seen those, but they're pretty insane. Very new as well, electronic drums, which I'm using, and they're pretty incredible, I gotta say. So that's this is a new thing that I'm doing, because I've been big into electronics for a long time, and a lot of the gigs that I do, you know, a lot of European artists that you may not have heard of, you know, because they sing in, you know, some of them sing in Spanish or German or whatever, so they're really big in Europe. And I use a lot of electronics on those gigs generally. I mean, there's one artist called Helene Fischer. If your viewers want to go and check her out, she's like the Beyonce of Germany. You know, we did like, you know, 30-date stadium tour. You know, everything's sold out. She has her own TV show, Fragrance Line magazine. You know, it's that whole celebrity thing that they do. and I used a lot of electronics on that gig. So a lot of pads, you know, lots of patch changes during the songs and everything. It's pretty involved, you know, triggers on a lot of drums and stuff like that. So, but yeah, the Gaver G9 are the ones that I'm using right now, and that's a relationship that's starting to develop really nicely. I know the guys there, and you know, they actually handle all of my drum workshop drums in Europe as well. So from an acoustic point of view, Drum Workshop, I've been with them for a long time now. And they're just incredible drums. They make things for me, which is, you know, is just a drummer's dream. You know, if you ask them to do something and you know, they say yes, and that works out, you know, really great. So I've got a lot of DW drums, and you know, loads of different snare drums that they've made for me, and they all just sound incredible.
Good stuff.
On my acoustic set, all of the cymbals are Zildjian. Again, I've been with them for a long time. I think they were the first cymbals that I ever played on. My dad used to have a set, and a really cool thing that they did actually was my dad's old ride cymbal. It was like a vintage 60s standard A 21-inch ride cymbal. And I loved it so much. I played all the bands that I played in when I was, you know, 10, 11, 12. I was using obviously his cymbals. You know, I'd sort of basically stolen all of his equipment and trashed the lot of it. You know, as you do when you're young and careless. So, but this ride cymbal I've been playing for a long time, and they I just finished the Tom Jones tour in the USA. Only a few years ago, actually, and I went to the factory in Boston. So they agreed to Paul Francis there, incredible, you know, technician, and just the things he can do with cymbals is insane. So I very cheekily asked him, and I'd taken it with me thinking that, you know, this could be a thing as well. And I just said, look, this cymbal is like, this is the reason I play Zildjian cymbals, you know, was like my dad's original set that unfortunately I trashed. The cymbals all cracked, and you know, the bell had a crack in it, but it was one of the nicest feeling ride cymbals I'd ever played. And I'd always been searching for that. So Paul very kindly took the cymbal and then remade me 2 of those cymbals, they've been played now on recordings, live dates, you know. They're the type of cymbal that I can use for almost anything that I do. So now it's very rare that I even use a different ride. I just use either one of those 2. And, you know, they just sound great. But yeah, wonderful company as well. So, stick-wise, Veta, I've been with Veta for a long time as well. I'm using these at the minute. I don't know if you can see those.
Yes.
They're a classic 5B, which is slightly bigger than the sticks that I've been using, you know, since I started. But I changed my technique a little bit, and I've always been trying to play a little quieter, just because I've been a little bit notorious for hitting the drums really hard, you know, which is great if you're playing in a stadium. But, you know, recording wise and all that kind of thing. And, you know, I've always enjoyed recording, and I've always played quieter in the studio anyway. But I just thought, you know, a stick like this works really well. You can get a lot of power without much effort, which is a little journey I think probably all drummers are on. But I'm definitely in that mindset now where I'm actually trying to be a bit more ergonomic with my movements, and, you know, trying not to be this crazy, you know, arms in the air, killing the drums kind of thing. Yeah, and Remo drum heads as well, which are the heads on this Gaver G9 kit are also made by Remo. These are the sort of dual ply mesh heads, but I use a variety of different Remo heads on the acoustic drums as well. And again, I'm going thinner on those heads. When I first started playing, I was playing Ambassador clears on everything. They're really bright, incredible sound. You know, all of the drums that I've used over the years have always sounded great with those. They don't last very long if you hit really hard. That was the thing. So I did in the end start changing over, especially on like stadium gigs and things like that, where, you know, I was hitting incredibly hard all night long. So I was using Emperors, and I've used a whole bunch of different things, and they all sound great for different music styles as well. And I found like the bigger the band, the sort of thinner the drum head I can use. More to do with sort of having that brighter attack, being able to cut through, so they sit in the mix a little bit better, or a little bit easier, I should say. And then when I'm playing in like a 4-piece band, as opposed to like a 10-piece band with brass and strings and the full thing, you know, going off. When I'm in, like, let's say like Mike and the Mechanics, for instance, there's like, you know, five guys on stage, and, you know, everyone is playing incredibly tastefully, and they're all playing their parts. The drums can afford to sound a little bit warmer, a little bit fatter, maybe a little bit more vintage sounding as well in some ways. But again, that also comes from some direction from what the artist wants as well, and the type of sound overall that they're trying to create, you know.
Yeah.
If it was a blues thing or whatever, maybe something different, you know.
Mm.
But maybe you know, like a vintage Ambassador coated or something like that. But I mean, Remo make a drum head for every for every occasion. So
Possibly a tough one here for you, Ben. It depends. Like, some people find this one quite like really straightforward. Other people have had really and ahed about it. So I think this is quite a hard question, and I would find it hard to answer. But that said, you know, I want to make your life difficult, Ben. I'm not here to make it. So if you had to pick just one, who would be your all-time favorite drummer?
that is really tough. I'm going to make it easy for myself, and I'm going to say my dad, because, you know, he's really the one who got me into it all, and the one that I looked up to, and, you know, answered all my early questions on how to play, what to do. You know, obviously I didn't listen to any of the answers that he gave, being a young whippersnapper at the time. But you know, it was yeah, I'd say my dad as a drummer. You know, and he, you know, in Wales, he was, you know, in a fairly well-known band with a record deal and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, so he had a lot of experience at the time, and was recording in, you know, all of the, you know, big London studios, and, you know, back when it was just a real classic time, you know. So that, yeah, that really, I think, influenced me more than anything. I mean, I obviously got into other drummers later on, but yeah.
I think that's a really nice answer. I love that. And now, if I make your life a bit easier and say, give us some other influences, then, you know, it doesn't have to just be the one. Now, talk about a couple of others. Who else would you pick?
You know, like, I guess like most people similar age to me, I love all the classic ones. Ringo, you know, I mean, Ringo's just incredible. There's a long list. I can't even remember them all now of, you know, just, I'm a big fan of music. And I'm not the best at remembering all the names of all the musicians that play on every single record, but I'm sure I could go and list, you know, a bunch of lesser well-known drummers that I just love the music, you know. All the classic ones like Bernard Purdie and Steve Gadd, obviously. I went through a Simon Phillips phase of really loving what he was doing, and taught myself to play open-handed, and I did that for a few years. And, you know, all those things were great for development. I mean, I wouldn't recommend necessarily copying, doing that type of thing, but a good lesson learned, you know, just teaching yourself to play left-handed and stuff is, and I love Simon's sound as well. Yeah, and there's loads of other guys. I mean, Richie Haywood, and, you know, Ginger Baker, John Bonham, of course. It's all classic, you know.
Cool.
And one that I don't think gets mentioned that often, and I used to love their music after my dad showed him to me was the Tubes.
Mm.
And Prairie Prince, the drummer from that band, just incredible, incredible playing. But always for the music, they weren't necessarily that famous for being sort of drummers,
And another one that people have found difficult. What's been the highlight of your career so far?
This interview, of course.
Yay, unprompted as well. I normally have to prompt people to say that.
I mean, musically, because there's a lot of different things that maybe at the time I didn't think were that significant, but when you look back, you go, wow, that was incredible. I think because I didn't, because of my age, I sort of given up any hope of working with any classic artists that I'd grown up listening to and really, loving what they were doing. So the thought of working with Tom Jones or even Mike Rutherford, in Mike and the Mechanics, and of course I was a massive fan of Genesis and all that stuff. The thought of working with anyone, of that sort of classic time, I'd sort of given up really, because, at 20, 25, 29-year-old, whatever, sort of, if I'd ended up working with anyone, I probably would have ended up working with a more modern artist, But that hasn't really been the case, a lot of the artists that I've ended up working with have been of that classic sort of time, which I love. That's the music that I really, really love. So if I could pick one, I think probably the highlight is just, playing the drums on the first gig that I did with Tom Jones in Atlanta, and just having him in my in-ear monitors, and I'd never ever played with him before I stood on the stage.
Oh, right.
To play that gig. So
wow.
That was probably the most nerve-wracking point in my career, but also the big standout one when I look back, that I go, I may not have worked again if that hadn't have gone well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't have any rehearsal with the band or anything. I learned a lot of songs, made a lot of notes. And because I joined the tour like a week after they started. So that became, I think a sort of pinnacle really of everything. But so they actually changed. The show changed quite a bit when I arrived, because I flew to Florida the night before to watch the previous gig, and the MD, who's the drummer as well, was leaving the show to do another gig. So I came in, and the show had changed from when they sent me a recording from like production rehearsals. So I'm making notes, and things change when the introduction to some songs will be longer or shorter, and added solos here and there. So I'd made all these charts, and sat sort of and watched the show in Florida the night before I was going to play it, and was like, man, this is all incredibly different. I was frantically just writing stuff out as I was listening to it, and they'd added some songs and that I'd never even heard, and so I was a mess. That night in the hotel, just up all night writing new charts, and I just thought, if I don't play the next night, without any really big mistakes, and probably word will spread, and I won't be working again. So thankfully that didn't happen. So I think that is a standout moment for me anyway.
And that links me really nicely to another question. When you first get a gig with a new artist, how would you normally learn the material? Now, obviously, you've just talked to us about a situation there where you didn't get that long to learn the material, and especially, you know, changes to the show, literally like 24 hours to learn it. So how would you normally learn a show? Obviously, how does it normally work in terms of rehearsals and things as well, in your experience? Do you normally just like listen to it off Spotify, or are you sent a drum heavy mix, or are you sent all of the charts and they go, here you go, Ben, here's a folder of all of the drum music with every single hi-hat and every single bass drum for you to learn?
Sometimes I wish that was the case, but no, unfortunately not. Every gig I've ever done has not been necessarily a reading gig. You know, if I make charts, obviously I read them. And the charts that I prefer to make are more in detail charts, you know, so they'll be notated and written out properly, but that's not always the case. It really depends on the music. But I went through a phase for a number of years actually, where I think I gained a reputation for the guy who doesn't need to rehearse, which at the time really annoyed me a little bit, because after I'd done the Tom Jones gig for the first time, I was actually doing the Mike and the Mechanics gig at a similar time, like a couple of weeks after I'd finished that one. So I actually learned about 70 songs in the space of about 2 weeks, or a week and a half, something like that, and charted as much as I could and learned what I could. And they were just, you know, MP3s that I'd been sent from, some of them live versions, some of them original versions, but then I just get a note, it's a few BPM faster, or we're doing it with this section in it instead of that. So it's some direction as to where we were going with it. But, you know, generally I'm just listening to a bunch of MP3s that have been sent through. Managed to just listen and learn. I mean, that's how I grew up playing anyway, just listening to CDs and records and stuff, and then copying it. Yeah. But yeah, that's generally how all the learning for me goes, is just listening and retaining as much information as possible. But rehearsal wise, I really didn't get any. Well, I didn't get any rehearsals with Tom Jones. He was straight in on the gig, 15,000 people. Don't make a mistake. See you at the end. You know. And so after that, everything else seemed a little bit easier. So I would just go to the Mechanics gig was like, 1 day rehearsal to do the entire show, you know. And then we would be throwing songs in just like you would do with a pub band. We go, oh, should we do this tonight? Oh, I've never played it. Okay, let me have a listen to it, and I'll make a quick chart, and then we just go and play it on the gig, you know. So that happened as well. And once you've done that a little bit, I think got really used to not rehearsing. So there would be gigs that would come up, and I would just be like, you know, the guy who didn't really need to rehearse. Obviously, I did my homework. I mean, it's not necessarily that easy to do that. You got to listen a lot and figure things out. But yeah, it just became that thing where every gig after that for about 5 years was like, you'll be okay. Just send in the songs and you just come in and do it, you know. And so I was like, everyone else is like in 2 weeks of rehearsal, really enjoying their time, and I'm sweating profusely, you know, stressing out about I've only got one chance to get it right. So thankfully, after about 5 years of that, I started getting gigs where either I was MD in the gig, so that we actually had a lot of time to work on things, and I would sit with and create the music, you know, way before the band got in. So, you know, that was cool. But yeah, that's generally how I do it anyways. Listen a lot and try and retain and make charts. Good stuff. And earlier on, we talked about career highlights. Now, this is a kind of a juicy gossip sort of question. To not career lowlights, but to things that maybe didn't go quite as we had hoped. So, have you ever had anything go wrong on stage that you've had to recover from? And by that, I mean, you know, either equipment fails, you know, silly little things that, you know, have affected your playing, or brain fails where you've played completely the wrong show or the wrong song, you know, anything like that you can tell us about. Nothing that really stands out, except I'm sure every drummer's had this, and as soon as I started using Drum Workshop drums, you know, the hi-hat clutch underneath the top cymbal, DW got this ingenious thing, which is just a little lock-in nut, which any drum kit that I'd used prior to being with Drum Workshop never had the lock-in nut underneath there or anything. So I would, you know, there'd be those times where you're just playing away and all of a sudden you've got no open hi-hats or anything, which, you know, is a complete nightmare if you're playing a show with a lot of open hi-hat parts in it. So yeah, that was something that used to happen quite frequently. In terms of a brain fail, I mean, pretty much every gig is a bit of a brain fail for me. But yeah, I can't think of anything really that has happened. Unfortunately, I know it's incredibly boring. I'm trying to rack my brain as to something really daft that's happened. But
as long as you didn't go out on stage for that Tom Jones gig, like the first one we hadn't rehearsed, and then you accidentally started playing a Mike and the Mechanics song, that would have been, you know.
No, it's been touch and go though. But yeah, it's nothing like that has thankfully happened.
So now a couple of curveball questions. The first one of those: what are your hobbies away from drums?
Food, I think, is my main. You know, not necessarily eating it, but you know, I love to cook. I do like the outdoors as well. So we've got a lot of dogs here and horses and stuff like that. So you know, as a family, we're pretty, you know, farm-like, you could say.
The question here is one that has captivated everybody, and everybody loves this question. It's the most important question of all of these interviews that everyone looks forward to. So what's your favourite biscuit?
Now, I don't actually eat biscuits, but if I had to choose one biscuit, it would probably be the regular digestive biscuit.
Okay.
I think they're the best for dunking in tea, and you know, you can eat quite a lot of them, which I think is important with a biscuit, that you don't get sick of them too soon.
And interesting there, you said about dunking it in tea. That's the next part of the question. So you are a dunker then, and you dunk it in tea and not coffee.
Yeah, I like to drink my coffee as coffee, you know, and without any milk, no sugar, nothing. I'm a bit of a purist in that sense.
Right, and this leads me nicely on to talking about the coffee. So I understand that you've got a new project on the go, if I can call it that, Stonehouse Coffee Beans. Talk to us about where that's come from and what it is, and where we can find out more about it.
Yeah, well, you know, like everyone, at the start of the sort of first lockdown last March, I think it was, you know, everything stopped. So after burying my head in the sand, like I guess a lot of musicians did for a month or so, started to think, well, you know, this is going on and on. So we need to really start thinking about, you know, what's going to happen, and thinking of a way out of it all, and that kind of thing. And so I started to think, okay, well, we've got I thought, you know, why not do you know, sort of keep busy with stuff. And so we did. We started doing the things that we never ever had time to do. You know, music had pretty much stopped overnight. And it took a little bit of time for any kind of music to come back. So we had this, you know, big period of nothing. So I don't know about you, Tom, but I always feel guilty for doing the things that I really like. I feel like I should be working all the time. I'm always trying to practice more, or, you know, write more music, or, you know, it's like a train that doesn't stop. So that when it all stopped, it took me a little while to get into that thing of like, oh, okay, I can spend time doing things that I really enjoy, you know, and food and drink being one of them. So the coffee, we started a coffee roasting business. So yeah, that's something that I've always been into in a big way. My sister-in-law is Ethiopian, so that's my eldest brother's wife. he's really into food and drink, and of course coffee, because all of their family are, are big into coffee as well. So we'd always had this thing. We'd always talk about it. I always, in every city that I'm in touring, and go and find the best coffee shops and sample as many different coffees we can, talk to people about it, how are they brewing it, all this stuff. So a real nerdy sort of love for all of that. I thought, you know what, let's put into action something that we can keep running alongside the music. So I started to learn more about coffee roasting and the origins of coffee, and why certain things were better than others, and what I liked and what I wanted to see in a coffee. And also some of the problems that were out there in mass-produced food, which I hate. Any sort of intensive agriculture and mass-produced food. I'd learned a lot about that in the past on other journeys to do with health, and I would go and spend time attending seminars from people who have become friends now, but yeah, that were big in the sort of health world, and I'm very knowledgeable on what foods are truly good and bad for us and the planet as well. So I'm very, very interested in all of that kind of stuff. So the coffee all came in line with all of that. The synergy was there, So that's how it started. Around about a year on now, into the company's sort of birth, and the company's called Stonehouse Coffee Beans. So yeah, if you add a .com on the end, you get the website. So stonehousecoffeebeans.com. And yeah, you'll find all of our different offerings on there. We do some other products other than coffee. We do travel mugs. I've got one over there that's actually just been brought in by my lovely wife, which I can't quite reach, but I'll grab that as soon as I can. Yeah, we do the travel cups, barista towels and things. We have a number of different coffees. We do little taster packs for people who maybe just want to try it and stuff like that. And yeah, we supply obviously people through our website. We supply some coffee shops now as well, and different bed and breakfasts, and just places like that, because we don't nothing is mass produced. It's all brought in direct from the farm. It's fair trade, it's organically farmed. We don't use big coffee distribution companies to buy our coffee from, and so we take great care in roasting it. It's all small batch. A lot of detail has gone into trying to create what I think is the sort of perfect everyday coffee. So
awesome. That's great. That sounds like a really great venture, and it's hopefully something that, as you say, can run really nicely alongside the music, especially while it's all on pause.
Yeah, exactly.
So my final question for you today, Ben, which I've changed slightly for people that have watched a few of these interviews. This one is now a slightly different question. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, so when you first started playing the drums, what would that be?
That's an interesting question. I think really to get out there and listen a lot more to people that were that you're around, the older players, the good players, that's something I wish I'd done, and also teachers as well, because I'm self-taught. I taught myself to read music. I taught myself to play the drums. Obviously my dad got me going on that, but the real development was all done without drum teachers. So in hindsight, I probably would have listened more to the people around me. I didn't really start to read music until I was maybe like 21, and I've been to music college as well, and I was gigging all the time. I was hardly ever there. I just would have made more of the opportunity that was right in front of me, rather than always, going for the glory, which was, someone calls up and you have to go and do another gig or another week here. And, I just always went to where the music was. And in hindsight, it was great. Don't get me wrong. That's part of my journey. But I would have definitely listened more to the people who maybe knew a little bit and were a little older, and I would have taken a bit more advice on board and actually used that advice. I mean, I always did that in bands. I would always be the youngest guy in the band, and I'd be like a sponge taking in all the information. But I never listened to teachers. I never listened to, to my college tutors. And, part of that was because I was recording in studios. And, a lot of times if you're studying music, maybe, when you're out there doing it, you think you know better and all that kind of stuff. So learning to read music from a lecturer in college or university to, listening to, the bass player who's, 30 years older than you, who's got something really good to say and advice to, impart on you. So just take all of that information, and above all else, do not be overconfident and cocky with it, because every youngster's got a little bit of that, and that's what makes youngsters young. But I see this more nowadays than ever, and this is really important, is you cannot watch one YouTube video and then become a teacher of all things you just saw 5 minutes ago on that video. It does not work like that, even if you tell yourself it does. And I see that a lot in youngsters nowadays. And real information from like those opportunities that I'm talking about, they're still there, and you still have to work really hard. So that I would say focus on that stuff and less on the candy floss that is being famous on Instagram or YouTube and everything. Really listen to the things that matter and work on those things, and your talent will come through. I wish I'd done more of that back when I was learning to play.
So Ben, thank you so much for spending your time with us at DrumWise today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
No problem, man. It's been my pleasure too.